Well, hello everybody and welcome. It's amazing all the stuff that goes on producing one of these live Video Mojo webcast, web show, podcast things that we're doing. This is Video Mojo. My name is Jon Leland, and this is our playful exploration of the bleeding edge of online digital social media engagement, and in particular video presence. I am delighted that today we have my good friend Michael Kass, and we're going to be talking about the third pillar of a vibrant video presence. But anyway, welcome. I'm really happy for those of you who are joining us live, and for those of you that are joining us via replay. I almost said videotape, but we know it's not videotape anymore. So in today's show, we will be looking at my opening tee it up is going to be how to avoid perfectionism, and really kind of the thing that I see over and over again that people that gets in the way really of having fun and taking advantage of all this cool video stuff. Then Michael Kass will be joining us for today's collaborative conversation about story, and not your traditional definition of engagement. I guess I'll tease it that way. And as always, we really love your questions, and we've created a whole area, the Q&A time, that I call Community Campfire, because your involvement is really kind of what makes this thing sing. So we look forward to your questions and comments. And then I have a Luscious link, as always, today, a book called The Biggest Bluff, that's about the balance between what you can control and what you can't control. So those are the four pieces of our four-course meal. Let's get into it. My tee it up today has to do with the perfectionism, and it came to me via Twitter, and I want to share with you kind of what that looked like. So I've talked on this show before about Ali Abdaal, and he posted on Twitter, "Why haven't you started a YouTube channel yet?" And I thought it was a great question, and this gentleman said, "I feel I'm not ready yet to produce the minimum quality that I want to put across." And Ali said, "That's the perfectionism trap." And I really think that's important. And he quoted his friend Simon Clark, I believe is this guy's name, that your first 50 videos are going to be crap anyway, so you might as well get through them quickly. And I think that's such a great lesson, and it's kind of what I'm doing here. We're learning, and we're working in public, and we're experimenting, and that's a practice and a discipline, and I think that that's where things come from. So don't wait. Start doing things, start engaging, start experimenting, and most of all, start learning. That's one of my big themes, and you do that by doing. So that's my tee it up opening commentary for today. Now I'm delighted to welcome Michael Kass. Michael is a good friend. He's got this kind of incredible resume. I'm going to grab his book over here and grab my glasses, because I noticed in the back of his book, Story Maps, a really kind of a nice little bio that talks about how he travels around as a coach, as a mentor, as somebody who helps use storytelling to create change. Come on, book. So he's won a bunch of awards for his own performances, been a Fringe Award winner in LA, San Francisco, San Diego, and Chicago. And his workshops and trainings are on storytelling, speaking, mindfulness. He's also a healer, a certified coach, and all-around good guy. I like Michael. So welcome back, Michael. It's good to have you here.
Thanks. I like you too. It's good to be back.
Oh, your video was frozen for a second, but now I think it's okay.
Okay, great.
So we've been talking about, for those of you who may not have been here, and I thought the whole world saw every episode of Video Mojo, just kidding, of course. We have done three pillars of, well, we've done two so far. We talked about humanity, and then we talked about the technology involved in a video presence. But today we wanted to do the third pillar, which has to do with story. And you and I were talking last night about engagement, and you said story is not really for engagement. You want to clarify that as a starting point for me?
Yes. I think what I said is story is not just for engagement. Like, engagement is the low-hanging fruit of story. And what I mean by that is when we think of story in our culture, we generally think of it as a unidirectional communication strategy, right? So I will tell a story to evoke a certain response from my, but that flattens and cheapens what story can actually do, which is become a co-created, interwoven basic building block of community, right? So when I think of story, when it comes to video or anything, what I hold in my mind is less what's your beginning, middle, and end, what's the perfect structure of your story, what's the reaction you want to invoke, and more, how are you inviting people to participate in creating something with you, whether that's a business or a movement or simply a moment, right? And so if we track where we've been in these three pillars conversations, right? The first pillar was humanity, which is being authentic in the moment. And then we have technology, which is all the stuff and the bibbles and bobbles we need to look good and sound good. And then story creates context. Story's the container, right? It's not just what we're saying. It's also what's the story that we're inside of in this moment? What are the stories that we're telling ourselves? How do those, I think of it as three stories, and we've talked about this as well, right? The story that we tell others, which is what most people focus on. Like, we have to dial in the story. Then there's a story we tell ourselves, and then there's a story we exist inside of. And vibrant presence comes from really understanding and being able to dance with the interrelationship between all three of those and inviting other people into it with you.
I'd love to get deeper into that, because I think that there's, we are talking about how to use story for a vibrant video presence. And I think that people think, you and I have talked about this in the past too, about how storytelling has become a buzzword du jour. And so they think about storytelling as another formula, another quick hit. So illuminate more what that process is like, about a deeper kind of engagement when you are offering an authentic story. How does that, what does that really look like? How does it feel? How does it, what is that process of a deeper engagement that story enables?
Yeah, I think what comes up when you ask that is we can only engage with people as deeply as we've engaged with ourselves. And so if we put that in the lens of story, it means that I can only connect with people through story as deeply as I've connected with the landscape of my own internal story or internal mythology, right? So it's one thing to tell the standard entrepreneur story, which we've all heard a million times, like, man, things were rough. I didn't have any clients in my coaching or marketing business or whatever, but then I stumbled on this one thing and I was able to buy my grandmother a house and look at this new car. Come work with me and you can have this too, right? That's kind of the, we've all seen these stories.
Yeah, and we're sick of them too.
Yeah, we're sick of them. Because also they're probably not true, which is a problem. So compare that to someone who has really spent time understanding that huge stories can exist in small moments, right? And has spent the time really exploring the landscape of their lives, exploring the landscape of decisions they've made, exploring the landscape of how they've grown their business, and finding those small moments of connection that resonated with them, that like vibrated in their entire body, and being able to share that with people so they can feel that resonance and then invite them into something, right? Something real and human. And that capacity exists in all of us, but most of us don't spend the time to really sit and say like, all right, what's just even a moment in the last week that made me feel so alive that I wanted to share it with the world?
And that's something you'd want to share. It's like you're making a perfect segue. I was looking at your book title, and it says the Wayfinding Tools for the Modern Seeker. Story maps, wayfinding tools. And that wayfinding concept is not one that would normally be connected to marketing or even to put yourself out in the world. But I know personally I'm finding my own path, and these live video mojo shows are a wayfinding for me. I'm experimenting and finding new ways to communicate and new ways to build community. Is that so? How does wayfinding relate to finding your message or a story that works best for you in terms of where you want to go as an individual? speaking kind of like for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that something that comes up when you ask that is thinking about the story that we're inside of right now. Because when we think of a map, generally, you see the whole picture, right? Like if I want to drive from here in Los Angeles to you up near San Francisco, I look at a map, I can plot out the route, I know exactly where to go. We're in a moment, the story we're inside of right now, our maps don't work, right? Our
they're
metaphorical
broken.
maps have broken down, right?
Yeah, uncharted territory.
We're totally uncharted territory. So anybody who says like, hey, here's how to do X, no, they don't know. Nobody knows. So the idea of wayfinding is in those moments where the path disappears and the map constricts, and so all you can see is just like what's around you in this moment. Wayfinding helps you find, and this is your term, these little breadcrumbs, right? And it just helps you say, okay, here's the next step. And I have no idea what the step after that is until I've taken that first little step. And there's all sorts of ways that you can become attuned to those breadcrumbs. Story is one of the most powerful because, for example, if we examine our lives and look for those moments where we felt most vital, where we felt most connected, most alive, then chances are if we go, I'm looking for more opportunities for that, please, and just like tune our senses into that, a breadcrumb appears. And it might not make any sense at all. It might come out of, there's no way to predict. And if you follow it, something else appears and something else. And eventually you start to draw a new map that doesn't look like maybe even what we thought the landscape would look like.
Yeah. And that's kind of exactly what's going on here. And I think that I love that it's counterintuitive from a marketing strategy point of view, but it does represent, one of my core values is around a willingness to play and experiment, just like I was talking about in the Tee It Up. And it's in the space of playing that I can discover breadcrumbs. If I'm locked into it has to be this way and this is the strategy and you got to do it right and you got to do it perfect, none of that is possible.
That's right. Yeah, it's. I was just talking with a client yesterday who, works in a major public services system, right? So in bureaucracy, in the most bureaucratic version of bureaucracy there could possibly be, and she's a get it done person. If she can move mountains when she puts her mind to it, and she's in a place of like trying to figure out where her next landing place is, and she hired me as a coach to help like create exactly what you're saying. Like, well, this and this, and then this, and then we're going to do this, and then there's going to be the strategy, and here's who I need to reach out to. And immediately, like, we threw that out because that's not fun. And we just kind of, I was like, well, what's the container you want to be inside of? And she listed a bunch of stuff. And I went like, great, write that down, put it in a drawer. And the second that she did that, these amazing, weird opportunities started coming in. They came seemingly out of nowhere. And she's blown away by this. And I'm like, it's not that those opportunities weren't there before. This isn't magic. It's just you're attuned to them and you're saying yes to them. Whereas before, they may have been trying to come in, but you were so hyper-focused on the path and the map that you laid out that you couldn't even see them. And so it's kind of a perfect example that when we allow ourselves to play and open into that space, whole new possibilities open up in our story within the context of that greater story.
Yeah, perfect. So let's go to the community campfire. I love this part of it, and we've got a kind of a lively chat going on. In fact, we've got a quote that I think goes right to what you were just talking about. Jim Baldwin has posted a quote from E.L. Doctorow that says, "Writing is like driving at night in the fog. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way." Right, you can see only as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. Thanks, Jim. So do you want to comment on that at all, Michael? Or that's just what you were just saying, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think you can actually apply that. It's not comfortable, right? Because when we think of that, that's part of the creative process. And I guess what's interesting to me is when we apply that idea to our business and find the balance between driving at night and trusting that the road we originally set out on is still there in some form or another.
Right. Yeah. James Baldwin also, he maybe doesn't even know about your background. He said, interesting story in many Native American cultures is a shared narrative. Picture a circle of participants, each with a different and perhaps contradictory point of view. The Western perspective is the authoritative single narrator, where there's one point of view. So I like the engagement of community concept for video. So go ahead. I mean, I know you've got a lot of experience with indigenous cultures and story as well.
Well, and that's when I work with organizations, we bring in that idea of story as co-creation, and every voice having holding a different thread of the narrative. And in fact, the narrative can't exist without every voice. And it's a profoundly different way of thinking about story than we're used to in, what we can call the Western mind. And that, what we see in Native American culture or Australian Aboriginal culture in these in what we can call indigenous mind is a much different, more holistic, co-creative approach to story, where story is not just something we make up. It also is part and parcel of the creation of the world itself, which is maybe a lot of weight to put on your business narrative. Well, and it's a really powerful thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think it points back to what we were talking about before in terms of the breadcrumbs. And the very typical, Vincent Castellana is commenting that he loves the idea of following the breadcrumbs, but he's concerned, I'm going to say afraid, about taking the leap. Right? So you must come up against people having those kind of fears all the time about making a leap, because we're talking about not going with a linear mind strategy. I love what you just said about the indigenous mind as kind of a more open, and you have to make that leap if you're going to follow breadcrumbs, if you're going to let go of the traditional structure.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yes, I do come up against that a lot. And there's kind of a way of thinking about it that when we make the leap, it has to be dramatic. Like we have to pull the plug on our old way of being and suddenly be in a new way. That's not true. So you can start making space for the breadcrumbs in small ways. And what tends to happen is the more you follow it, even in small ways, then the easier it becomes until a year, 2 years, 3 years later, you look back and go, oh my goodness, my way of thinking about the world and interacting with myself has changed completely. But it happened at such a deep, gentle level that maybe I wasn't aware what was going on much of the time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that this is an acronym. Stephen is asking about, this is why the YA book community is so vibrant. I know that acronym YA. I'm not even sure what he's talking about, though.
Young adult.
A young adult. And because of so Stephen, I guess I'm not clear about your question, or do you get it, Michael?
I think so. So, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, Stephen, but the young adult book community there are vibrant communities that spring up around young adult series, right? Where it becomes, Harry Potter's a great example, where now it's interesting where the fans of Harry Potter have actually said, we don't agree with J.K. Rowling right now, but it's not going to spoil this world for us. This is ours. And we are co-creating the mythology of it, right? Same thing, you see it with Hunger Games. There's some amazing stuff happening online right now with some online communities. An example, my friends, we may have spoken about it before, John, started playing Dungeons and Dragons together like 8 years ago, just for fun. And then they started filming it. And they got a bunch of fans. It's called Critical Role. And it has become a bona fide movement. Like they have almost single-handedly revived tabletop Dungeons and Dragons gaming. And it's because the fans, right, have become a self-created community.
Yeah. He confirmed in the chat that Dracula stories, Star Wars, all of that, and then you've given some excellent references too. Yeah. So if people want to follow up, you're available as a coach and a mentor. You lead with I didn't mention before some of the big tech companies that you've worked with on
Yeah.
story, but it's storyandspirit.com, right?
.org, storyandspirit.org. Yeah.
Storyandspirit.org. So you can find out more about Michael and connect with his work. And this Story Maps is available on Amazon.com or the bookseller
That
of
is
your
correct.
choice, hopefully, right?
Yeah. It is on Amazon.com.
It's a really cool little book, and it's not a long read, but it does go deeper into this idea of stories. Um, We'll go one last quote. James Baldwin is into the quotes today. He's got one now from Joseph Campbell. Read breadcrumbs. It's going down into the abyss.
Hmm.
It is by going down into the abyss that we recover the treasures of life. Where you stumble, there lies your treasure.
Yes, absolutely.
Any final words of inspiration regarding, being willing to take the plunge as we were talking about before? That's a beautiful inspiration. Thank you for that, Jen.
Yeah, I love that quote. And um, I feel like we've all actually already been into the abyss. And sometimes it's less about doing something new and more about appreciating where we've been and re-examining it and saying, oh, where were those moments where I stumbled? Let me look inside that for knowledge and treasure that may want to be shared with the world or shared with the community, right? So I think that we've all been through much more than we give ourselves credit for. And it might not have felt like a big deal. But often those moments where we don't think we're making decisions are the moments at which we reveal ourselves most deeply. And if we can find the story at the core of those moments, then we can connect really deeply and vibrantly with a whole bunch of folks.
Yeah, and actually, I'm a little later going to talk about future episodes of Video Mojo, but next week, our mutual friend Andrea J. Lee is on, and we're talking about how to address some of those more challenging stories and really embrace them as that kind of treasure that Jim was just referring to. So, Michael, you're awesome. I really appreciate you being on this journey with me and being part of Video Mojo. And now we've got all three pillars of vibrant video presence in the can. So it's taken a little while, and we kept going. We persisted.
Go team.
Thanks again. Talk to you soon.
You're welcome. Thanks, John.
So this is the dessert of our four-course meal. And today I want to talk about a book that I listened to, an audio book, and I love that Maria Konnikova read it herself. And it's a book about a journey using poker as a metaphor for life. It's called The Biggest Bluff: How I Learned to Pay Attention, Master Myself, and Win. And what's really kind of fun about this book is, one, it's a very real journey. She used the world of poker and the professional poker tour as a way to learn. And as much as anything, one of my favorite parts about this book was the way that she talked about her process of learning. To me, it's a mind-opening thing to take a year plus, as she did, and learn a whole new skill. She went from knowing nothing about poker or how to play poker to being a winner on the professional poker tour, which is amazing. So I loved her reflection. She's also a psychologist, and she, one of the main themes was getting clear about the things in life or in poker that you can control and the things that you can't control. Because you can control your skill and your ability to play the game, but you cannot control the cards. So I love the quote which says, it's not about the cards you're dealt, but how you play them. Everybody gets good cards and bad cards, but how you play it and develop that skill is a different thing. There's another part of it too, which is the fact that she got herself a really good teacher. Eric Seidel, who's won 8 professional World Series of Poker bracelets, she managed to get him to be her teacher. And he's not one of these, you got to play every hand the same. Here's the formula. This is what you do in this position with these cards. He's very much, it's about the people and the dynamics and knowing what situation you're in any moment. and other lessons like being aware of your emotional state. One of the things in poker, I like poker and have played casually for years. It's like you don't play when you're on tilt. That's the poker term. So I really recommend this book. Maria is a really great writer, and it's a really profound journey. The Biggest Bluff by Maria Konnikova. So I really thank you for being here. The next 3 weeks, amazing people. I'm just delighted to have collaborative conversations. Andrea Lee, as I said before, we're going to be talking about how to address the stories that really need to be told. And some of those are difficult and vulnerable. She herself has been quite public about recovering from the abuse that she's experienced. Sean Shepard is an amazing coach and keynote speaker, and is totally fun. I'm really looking forward to having him. And Jay Akunzo, I connected with through the Content Marketing Institute. He's a big proponent of shows and webcasts like this, podcasts and so forth, and how big companies and medium-sized companies are using that in storytelling. So hope you'll join us at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern every week, both on Facebook and on YouTube. And if you're looking for more of Video Mojo or me or Com Bridges, we created this link, play.combridges.com/links. That's our link tree, and there's all kinds of stuff there for you. So that's Video Mojo for this week. I'm really, really pleased and grateful that you give us your kind attention. And it's available on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, YouTube and Facebook, and we post it all over the place. So we love your comments and feedback, and they also really help. So thanks again for being here, and we'll see you again next week.